When they first came to me about it, I was incredibly excited because I'd been excited about the series since I was a kid, but specifically because I was drawn into the emotion of Andy Serkis and Caesar. And I just thought that in the first film, the way that you saw his character and the other apes around him sort of coming into being, the way you saw him thinking and putting things together, there was so much that happened. Much of the movie was almost like a silent film. So little was said, and yet you could feel what he was thinking, and you could see sort of every moment coming into sort of being, just sort of blossoming. And I thought, wow, that's just so exciting, just to have that experience. And for me, what was exciting was this notion of picking up in a way from somewhere where the last film went, taking that next step forward. What I thought was exciting about this idea, which was that you would be going a step further toward an ape civilization, was taking that character who was sort of a revolutionary and watch as he became a leader, and a leader really of a group of apes that were all part of a family, so that you could see all the different aspects of Caesar that made you emotional in the first film, and that would hopefully only take you deeper and deeper into that in Dawn, and see what he was like as a father, see what he's like as a leader, see how he will lead in difficult times. It's one thing to be a revolutionary, it's another thing to have sort of a difficult moral dilemma that you have to grapple with. When we pick up in Dawn, it's 10 years later, and the simian flu has wiped out most of the Earth. In fact, as the story begins, you wonder, did any humans survive? And as Dawn begins, the feeling is that it's the dawn of a new species, that it's basically intelligent apes have inherited the Earth. And over the course of the story, you start seeing what they've created, and it's almost a kind of, I wouldn't say Eden because that's a little bit too sort of idyllic, but you see the purity and the beauty of what they've created, and you see them as a family and as these creatures who are in a way kind of paralleling our own evolution, if that makes sense. There's a kind of tribal existence, a tribal phase that they're in. And once you start to see, you see Caesar not only as a leader, you see him as a father. He's got a son, he's married, but he also has a newborn right at the beginning of the story. And there are all of these sort of connections between them that define a group that you have hopefully a very deep emotional affinity for, and you start going, oh, well, this is their world, so what's this movie about? And just about the time when people ask that question is when suddenly we find out that there are humans left. The humans are, of course, just recovering from really the worst possible situation imaginable, which is the tremendous death and violence that came with the simian flu. And so both of them are trying to survive, both of them are trying to move forward, and the question is, can they exist together, or will one of them have to destroy the other? And we know the way Caesar is, he grew up with humans and apes, and so he has an understanding of both. And obviously the idea would be, with these stakes, and with the precious lives at stake on both sides, any way through that could allow for peace is going to be the path that Caesar's going to want to take. But you also know that he's a fierce protector of his kind, of his family, and he's not going to put them at risk. So what will happen? And at that point, once the sort of contact is made, from that point through the rest of the film, the question of violence lives under every moment in the film. Jason Clarke plays Malcolm, who is a father and who has gone through hell, basically after the viral apocalypse, and who is trying to find a way to move forward and to heal his family. And he is the one who has compassion, who really has empathy for the apes, and wants to come to understand them, but is also afraid of them. One of the great things about Koba, who Toby Kebbell plays, is that he's a character who, just as Dreyfus on the human side has a reason to mistrust the apes, based on what Toby's character has been through, he has every reason to mistrust humans. And actually in Rise, you've seen Koba. Koba was the lab chimp who was tortured mercilessly by the humans, and so you can understand that he would have no place in his life for humans. Andy Serkis he's just one of the best actors I've ever worked with. I mean, he's an incredibly emotionally committed, intelligent, just beautiful person. And he has such an understanding of Caesar from the inside. And it's all about finding the way to express that emotion. We wanted to shoot it in 3D, and so essentially what we were doing was we were taking every camera when you're doing 3D is 2 cameras. And so you're taking these huge cameras that are so big they literally have to be carried on cranes. And we're going up to the woods, on a hillside, in the rain, in the mud, with motion capture cameras all around us in these ridiculous conditions, all so you can feel like you're out there in primal nature with the apes. And it was ridiculous to shoot, but seeing the results is incredibly exciting because it's doing exactly what I had hoped it would do and what Weta promised it would do, which is to take you and put you in that world in a way that feels tangible and real. Gary Oldman he's just amazing. And it was so exciting to get to work with him. It's funny because one of the things we talked about very early on was that the most compelling reason for him to want to be in this film was he connected to the story. He thought that the story was such a moving story. This idea of the humanity, for lack of a better term, in the apes and in the humans, and trying to find some way to work this out, that he found that very moving. And so he really wanted to be involved because of how much he connected to the story. And what that brought to Dreyfuss was, it goes beyond what words can say, because he gave such a emotionally committed performance. At its heart, the movie is actually an emotional drama, and it all centers around that. But when it explodes into the action, we wanted it to be as exciting, but also as realistic as possible. And one of the things that we did, because just as Weta had found ways to make the apes just look more real than in the last film, the other thing we wanted to do was deal with ape movement. And so in these action sequences, how do you do it in a way so that it doesn't start looking like a superhero movie, a movie where the apes are doing things that suddenly sort of make you step back and go, okay, so this is the sequence where I guess it starts getting fantastical. We wanted to see really spectacular action that felt as real as possible. So we used a team of parkour ape stuntmen. It's about grappling with the different sides of ourselves and having to come to terms with the animal in all of us and to find a way to reconcile the parts of our nature and the struggle to do that. And that's why I think it's all so captivating. And to me, the idea of what's exciting about trying to do a movie like that is to let that be the only element of fantasy that's there, so that everything else feel utterly real and you just sit there watching it as if it actually happened. And that's a very powerful idea. And that's everything we've been trying to do between what we've been doing with the actors, between what Weta's doing, what we've been doing with production design, is to try and take that fantasy and make it not feel like a fantasy at all. I hope that the audience is going to be swept up in the very uncanny nature of feeling like they were truly in the world of apes, and that the most mysterious thing about it is that they could relate to the internal lives of what was going on inside of those characters, that through the experience that the audience themselves become apes, that they feel for the plight of the apes, and that they feel the thrill of the apes, and that they actually also feel the terror of being in the midst of these animals. And so that it should be hopefully a very, very exciting experience, because it's both emotional and terrifying and thrilling.